Hey, I'm Shaye Wanner, and you're listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. Whether you are a seasoned rancher or just curious about the cattle world, this podcast dives into the stories, science, and strategies shaping the future of ranching. Let's get started to keep your herd ahead of the herd. Folks, today we are visiting with Russell Carrell from the Cargill Animal Nutrition team about how to get the most out of your mineral program. Russell is passionate about serving producers and is going to share a lot of information about how to find the right mineral program for you, controlling mineral consumption in cow herds, pre-weaning minerals, and how salt should or should not be incorporated into mineral programs. Remember, if you are looking for a speaker or a moderator for your upcoming event, I am booking for 2025. You can reach out to me on my website. But with that, let's chat with Russell. All right, Russell. Well, thank you for joining me today for this conversation. I know the topic of mineral programs is always an important one and one that this audience enjoys and my Rancher Mind members enjoy. So I'm excited to bring it back to the show and have you on as a guest today. So before we dive into the topic and your background a little bit, the question I always like to know from everyone is, why do you choose to work in the beef industry?
I work in the beef industry because I'm passionate about serving others. And I think that what we do and helping feed the world and helping people take care of the ground and rejuvenate the earth is it's a very rewarding thing. And getting to be outside and work with others just really makes what I do enjoyable and something that is easy to get up and go to every day.
Absolutely. There's a lot of people who are servicemen and women in the industry, and I think we all are in some capacity. So you are on the team with Cargill Animal Nutrition. So can you tell the listeners a little bit about your role and what you're doing in the beef industry today to serve others?
So my role is as a beef technical services specialist. And what I do is I help people with their day-to-day nutrition problems, essentially anywhere in the United States that there's cattle. I've worked all the way from Florida to Hawaii in my 3 years with Cargill. And I do everything from diet formulation to helping choose mineral programs and troubleshooting any kind of problem you can really think of that might pertain to mineral and sometimes not pertain to mineral, and just helping customers get put in touch with the right people and really just helping be a professional problem solver. That's one of the things that I'm really passionate about, is helping people and having impacts on their business and providing them value and not just a feed or a mineral to put in front of cows.
So when we're looking at mineral programs as a whole for ranchers, what would you say is one of the biggest mistakes, or maybe a better way to put it is a missed opportunity that ranchers are making with their mineral programs?
So when it comes to mineral programs, the biggest challenge that we run into is finding a product that cows will consume consistently throughout the year. The best mineral you can put in front of your cows is a mineral that the cows will eat. And that formulation is going to look different. Again, if you're in Deep East Texas where I live, that mineral isn't going to be the same as it would be in South Dakota. And so understanding your environment and finding a mineral that those cows will consume is really the biggest challenge or the biggest missed opportunity. If we can get cows to eat a mineral consistently, not overconsume, not underconsume, but really hit that target intake, we can prevent a lot of the problems that we would normally expect to see from mineral deficiencies.
So say you're working with a rancher and they come to you and say, hey, my cows just are not consuming like I think they should. They're really not. I'm not having to put mineral out as often as they should. It looks like their intake is low. How do you help that rancher troubleshoot that situation? And I know that might be different regionally, like you said, but where do you kind of start with that?
So we start kind of at the same place, regardless of where we're at. The first thing that I'm going to do is I'm going to evaluate the environment. I'm going to look and see where they are, what's the mineral profile of the soil that they're working in, that they're ranching in, what is the water like where they are. So typically when we think about mineral, people think about the forage and the soil, but a lot of the times the water can really tell us what the problem is. And once we kind of know what environment we're working in, I then kind of transition to looking at the mineral program that they're currently on and looking at a few key ingredients that are going to really have an impact on intake. When we think about regulating intake on a mineral, most people's mind immediately goes to salt, which salt is going to be an ingredient that can both drive and limit intake of a mineral. But also 2 minerals to really keep in mind when it comes to intake are going to be phosphorus and magnesium. So phosphorus and magnesium are both very bitter. And so when we increase the quantity of those ingredients in a product, we can really knock back intake. So if cattle aren't consuming enough mineral, I really like to get a lower phosphorus mineral. If cattle are really over consuming, or they're in an area that's really phosphorus deficient, we can increase that phosphorus. Same kind of goes with magnesium. Depending on the time of the year and the state of the forage is going to really dictate how much magnesium we want in that mineral. But when it comes to intake, those are really some of the key things that, from an ingredient standpoint, that have a big impact. From there, then you wouldn't be surprised at how many conversations I have about mineral feeder placement. So it's really easy for intake to get off track if the cows can't find the mineral feeder. If the mineral feeder is hidden so well from the cows that they can't find it, we can't expect them to consume like they should. And on the other side of that coin is if we place the mineral feeder right next to a water source, the cows are more likely to overconsume that mineral.
We will definitely talk a little bit more about that, but I want to go back to, you brought up water and how that can impact mineral consumption or what types of mineral maybe your cows need. So are you just having ranchers send in water test samples? And if so, how often are you having them send those in, or how often should ranchers check their water?
When it comes to mineral antagonism, so water really, if you can get an idea of what your water has from a mineral standpoint, I don't know that it's going to change a whole lot. We start talking about things like water hardness and nitrates and bacteria. That can change depending on drought and such. But to really answer your question, if you can get a good base knowledge of what your water's mineral levels are for things like iron and sulfur and molybdenum, that can really tell you what kind of antagonism you've got and really get you an idea of what level of mineral do you really need. Because the antagonism is really going to be found in that water source. And if you've got well water versus pond or tank water, those should be sampled separately. And it's not a cheap test, but if you have mineral issues or you're not having the breed ups that you think you should have, it's something that can provide a really large return on your investment. If you send in a $30 water test, it can give you a lot of answers and really give you a good roadmap to where you need to go on your mineral program.
Well, thank you for talking more about that. Is there anything else you want to talk about related to water?
No, just clean water, and a lot of it is always important. And again, when we start thinking about drought, hopefully we don't hit another drought this year, but when it comes to drought, nitrates are a big issue. And then as water levels get low, all the water has got some level of mineral content in it. And as the water level drops, that concentration of minerals is just going to increase. So we just need to be mindful of our water. And sometimes it's that's something that just really gets overlooked really easily.
All right. Well, thank you for talking about that. Now, right before we went into water, you talked about mineral feeder placement, and you brought up how, if you put the mineral feeder right by the water, sometimes that might lead to overconsumption, or you want to make sure that the mineral feeder also is in a place where the cows can find it so that they can consume it, obviously. So do you have anything else you want to talk about as far as helping ranchers make sure that their mineral source is placed appropriately in the pasture?
Sure. So it's going to be on a case-by-case basis. If you've got cows that historically don't like to consume a lot of mineral, maybe we do place it right next to the water source, because the logic there is that if they go get a bite of mineral that's got some salt to it, they're going to be thirsty and they're going to want to go get a drink of water right behind it. And then that will kind of domino into them going back to the mineral feeder. If you've got cows that they eat mineral like it's candy, maybe we push it a little further away so that after they go get that bite of mineral, they need to walk half a mile to find the mineral or to get to the water source. So It's on a case-by-case basis, and that's something really easy that a rancher can do on a day-to-day basis to help regulate and manage that intake without having to drag me out or look at changing a mineral formulation or going and getting another ton of a totally different mineral. It's a really simple tool to use that can be really effective without any added cost.
So as ranchers go throughout the calendar year, what are some things they maybe need to consider adjusting with their mineral program?
Depending on where they're at, the state of the forage is going to be a big driver of how much those cattle are going to want to consume mineral. Typically, when we have lush green forage and there's high moisture content in the forage, we see higher levels of consumption. However, there's certain parts of the world where we have really mineral dense forages, especially in native range, where when the forage lushes up and goes green, the cattle kind of turn off the minerals. So again, it really depends on where you're at, but just know that as the seasons change and as your forage base changes from actively growing to dormant, the consumption of the mineral by your cows can also change with that. And it's just being out and monitoring and having an idea of how much mineral should you be going through on a day-to-day basis. You know, we tell people that 150-pound bag of mineral has 200 servings in it. So if you have 20 cows, that bag of mineral should last them roughly 10 days. And if they're going through it in 7 days, well, we know that they're eating a little more than they should. If it takes them 15 days to eat it, well, maybe they're not consuming at the rate that we'd like them to. And so just having the ability to kind of go out and do what I call some simple cowboy math can be really effective and help you manage on a day-to-day basis and make those decisions on what they're consuming. But again, to answer your question, the time of the year in terms of the weather and the forage conditions can have a big impact on how much your cows are consuming.
So what would be the consequences potentially of not making adjustments with the calendar year, or, you know, letting cows maybe overconsume or underconsume? What would be some of the consequences of being indecisive or just not making any changes?
So when it comes down to it, it's going to cost the rancher extra money. If those cows are over-consuming, when you think about a bag of mineral, a standard bag, an average cost on a bag of mineral is $30. Well, if they're going through it twice as fast as they should, you're going to be doubling that cost, and you're going to have a really good relationship with your mineral sales rep, but you're going to be spending more on mineral than you really need to. On the other end of that, if those cows are under consuming or you're not keeping feeders filled up, those cattle maybe aren't getting all of those macro and micronutrients that they need. And you're going to see it when it comes weaning day and preg check day. So essentially, if intake's off, we can potentially see some dollars lost, whether it be on the front end by paying for more mineral than we should, or on the back end when we have a loss in production due to lack of intake.
Well, and we talk a lot about return on investment and being effective with that dollar on that show, so thank you for talking about that. Now, one thing I know that I've experienced, and I know other ranchers have experienced, is, trying to find that right mineral program for them. So when ranchers are, a bunch of different reps are driving in the yard saying, hey, look at this, we'd love to work with you. What are some things ranchers can do to look at those labels, look at that data, and truly sort out which program is going to be right for them?
So one of the things that I really urge my customers to do is to not get in a worry about the levels of different minerals on a tag. Just because one tag has 8,000 parts per million of zinc and another has 7,000, that doesn't necessarily mean that more is always better. One of the things that I'm really big on is reinforcing that as long as we are meeting the needs of those cattle and getting them the nutrients, the consistent consumption is probably more important than the level of the nutrients on the tag. And then also whoever is providing you your mineral should be tied into your business, and they should be people that you trust and people that can help solve problems for you. The way I work with my customers is if I can't bring value to your business, then I really don't have a leg to stand on to ask for your business to begin with. So I'm really big on reinforcing to people that, hey, the people that you should be doing business with should bring value to your operation. If a company is just selling you on some kind of, I hate to use the word gimmick, but if they're just trying to sell you something and they're not helping you solve problems and helping bring value to your business, I personally just don't think that's the best way to go about helping people. So again, I'm in the business of helping people and solving problems. And so if I can find one of our products to be a vehicle to solve your problems, then I feel like I'm more likely to earn your trust and earn your business, as opposed to just putting a tag in front of you or trying to lowball the next guy that comes through the gate on price.
Well, absolutely. And that's another thing we talk about a lot, is finding that team of people to help you with your ranch. Ranchers are Jacks and Jills of all trades, but it's really hard to be an expert in everything. I mean, I don't know anyone that is. I know a lot of very smart people, but we need help and support, and it's important to find the right person for that. Now, you mentioned not worrying about, the levels necessarily and how of each mineral and how consistent consumption is important. But what about looking at organic versus inorganic sources? Can you talk a little bit about that and what ranchers need to be aware of?
Absolutely. So my stance on organics versus the inorganics is that both have a place for different operations. Organics are very effective and bypass all of our antagonism in the rumen. But in some parts of the world, we don't necessarily have enough antagonists to really justify the added cost. Other parts of the world, I'm a believer in, like, you have to have it. Again, an example of that is where I live here in East Texas. If we can have a good inorganic mineral that's using, again, just a balanced formulation and getting those cows everything and having the correct intake, our ground is pretty forgiving. Our water is very high quality, and we can get by with a good inorganic mineral most of the time. In parts of the world where we have some high sulfur levels in the water, some high molybdenum in the ground, we almost have to have that organic source to overcome the antagonism that our cattle are fighting. So again, it's just knowing what your ground has, what your water has, and making the best decision. And in a lot of cases, those organics can provide a pretty good return on investment. They're very good products, but it's not something, I try to be very honest with people, and that not everyone needs it. And we can get the same level of performance. Again, if an organic is not going to bring you any added value and isn't going to add any performance to your herd, I don't like recommending it. So that's my stance on it. It's another tool. Organics are another tool in our tool belt, and it's just knowing where the appropriate place to use it is.
So where should ranchers go to determine what they need? And I mean, is that going to extension? Is that going to their mineral rep? I mean, where can they go to sort out what situation they're in?
I would start with looking at their production records. So if you've been using an inorganic and you aren't getting the weaning weights that you want, you aren't getting the pregnancy rates that you want, you're having problems with sickness and health, that is a really good starting point. Incorporate your veterinarian, incorporate your mineral rep, and really build that team to help make that decision. From there, I would say that you also need to give yourself, if you choose to make that decision and choose to go with an organic to try and see some added production, give it time. You need to give it at least a year, really a couple of years to see if you're getting that return you want. But I would look internally before I went really to anyone. Before you called me, before you called another nutritionist or a sales rep, go through your production records and see kind of how you're performing. And if you're not getting the performance that you want, maybe an organic mineral can help supplement that, and we can see some added value from it.
So you mentioned pregnancy rates and weaning weights there. Is there anything else performance-wise that you are using mineral kind of as the vehicle to help ranchers with?
When it comes to mineral, we can provide a lot of different additives that can be very beneficial from gain standpoints. health standpoints, animal welfare standpoints, whether it be an insect growth regulator such as Alticid or Clarifly. We can use mineral as a carrier for rumensin, as well as different prebiotic and probiotic products that can go in. Mineral is a great carrier for a lot of different additives and nutraceuticals that can really provide a lot of benefit to the business.
Russell, is there anything like new and exciting and innovative in the mineral space? I know we're kind of shifting gears here, but I'm just curious what you're excited about when you think about, the nutrition space as a whole and that area that you're working in the beef industry.
So one of the things that I think is really impactful that we're starting to use more of is weaning minerals and kind of backgrounding minerals. So minerals that include things like those organic trace minerals and include products such as Diamond V XP yeast to really get calves started and really set them up for success as they move through the different chains of production in the industry. When we think about things like BRD, it's a big killer, quite literally, to our young calves. And when we can be up front and we can be ahead of different things and get cattle started correctly on feed and give them that good immune supply that they need through organic minerals and through things like XPC yeast, it's exciting to be able to set those calves up and put them on a path to put a good quality meal on someone's plate while caring for that animal throughout its whole life and hopefully not ever having to manage sickness out of a bottle. So that's something that I'm seeing a lot more of out of the mineral space that I'm personally excited about is helping those people that are starting calves and weaning calves get more calves going quicker and reducing the amount of morbidity and mortality in our herds. Again, it's good for the cattle, it's good for the people, and it's good for business. So I don't really see a downside to those things. And it gives me an opportunity to really show what good nutrition can do for the health of the cattle.
Are you a believer that animal health and performance with that calf really starts with the cow and utero?
Yeah. So the thing about, and there's plenty of research out there to reinforce this, but that calf, the day that calf is conceived, the nutrition of that cow is going to have as much or more impact on that calf while in utero as anything we do to the calf once it's born. So making sure that we keep that cow in a state of good nutrition and keeping her plenty of minerals to keep those liver supplies up, it's gonna help us create a calf and grow a calf that is going to live a good, healthy life and grow in a way that is going to be, business speaking, advantageous for that producer. And again, put a good, healthy, protein, nutrient dense meal on someone's plate someday. Because when we think about it, when that calf is born, all of its mineral supply that it has is coming from the uterine transfer of minerals from that cow during pregnancy. Milk, colostrum are not good sources of mineral. And so it's really important that we keep those cows in a good state of mineral supply throughout the entire pregnancy and not really focus just on one part of production. We see a lot of people that really focus on mineral when the cows are with bulls. And really those cows need to be in a good state of mineral supply year round. Same with our bulls. So people seem to focus on the bulls when they're about to be fertility tested, but the reality is we've got to try and find a way to keep those bulls consuming. Bulls tend to not want to consume as well as cows, but their state of mineral is just as important to the cows so that we can get that optimum level of sperm production and keep those bulls fertile and keep them healthy and keep them working. Bulls are a very, very large expense and a big investment for ranchers right now. And so any small investment that we can make to protect that investment, I think is worth making right now.
Is there anything different producers should be supplying to their bulls for a mineral in the off season compared to their cows for optimum fertility? So
again, I think that if you've got bulls, especially young bulls that are getting ready to be fertility tested for the first time, bulls definitely can see some benefit from an organic trace mineral. Again, just having something that if we can get them to consume it, that organic mineral is going to help with, especially the organic zinc, is going to help with spermatogenesis and help with the production of those sperm cells in the testes. I think that something like that can be beneficial, but again, it's just getting a bull to consume mineral is challenging enough. So just having something that they'll eat, I think, is a big win.
So going back to the weaning and backgrounding mineral that you kind of led in with to this little segment, like how soon before weaning should producers be putting that out for the calves to see benefit from it?
So when it comes to a weaning or a starting mineral, typically we see that here at Cargill, we have a couple different options of our wean and grow mineral. And what that is, we have a free choice mineral that can be put with the calves as soon as they're weaned and they're put in the pens. And if they've been with cows that have been consuming mineral, hopefully they've kind of learned to eat out of a mineral feeder. And then my preferred method of getting mineral to those calves is through their feed. So when we wean calves and we put them in a backgrounding situation, we're training those calves to eat. And if we can put an organic weaning trace mineral that's got some of those prebiotics in it, and we can help use that through the feed and you get those calves to start on feed with that product in it, we can get that consistent consumption, because if they're going to a feed bunk or they're going to a bulk feeder every day, every bite of feed they take from there is going to have some level of those minerals that we want in them. So we don't have to rely on them to go take a lick from a tub or from a loose mineral feeder. If we can put it in their feed and we can get them trained to come to the feed bunk, we know that we're getting those levels of vitamins and minerals in them that they need. And it's just going to be beneficial for them through the rest of their lives.
Well, awesome. Thank you for explaining that. And one thing that kind of popped into my mind that I maybe should have brought up towards the beginning of this episode is you touched a little bit, when we were talking about overconsumption and underconsumption, you touched a little bit about how salt can be used to kind of control consumption in some ways. Do you want to talk a little bit more about how salt can be effective to include in a mineral program and different ways ranchers are using that to control consumption?
So the way that I teach people about it is I love to crack open a bag of Lay's potato chips. And I tell people that Lay's always have that moreish taste to me. And that as I take a bite of one potato chip, it just makes me want to go get more. And it's the salt that really drives my intake. But if you were to pour a whole salt shaker in that bag of salt, I would be less incentivized to go eat more potato chips. And so it's the same concept with mineral. A little bit of salt can really drive cattle to want to consume the mineral. Cattle have a taste for salt. They like the way it tastes, and so it can drive them to the mineral bunk to get them to lick that mineral. However, just like anything else, they're going to eat, if they eat so much salt, they're going to go looking for that drink of water to kind of help get that taste out of their mouth and help balance out those electrolytes. So a little bit of salt can be a really good driver. A lot of salt can be a really good way to help limit some intake. And again, the part of the world that we're in can also have an impact on how much salt we use. If you're in way West Texas, where there's not a lot of salt in the air, not a lot of salt in the ground, we can maybe include a little more salt. If you're on the Gulf Coast in Southeast Texas, salt's everywhere. It seems like it's in the air, it's in the water. So maybe we don't need to include quite as much to keep those cattle consuming like we want to. So again, it's really about knowing where you are and what you have in your environment, and then we kind of manage from there.
So do you have a preference if producers are using a salt block or mixing like loose salt in with their loose mineral? Do you have a preference there for which option producers pick?
So my opinion is we should not be including any extra salt in the diet. The bags of mineral themselves are going to have some level of salt in them, and that formulation is going to be specific enough to meet the salt requirements and help regulate intake. When we add additional salt into the diet for those cows, the cattle are driven to salt. And so all we're doing is we're really washing out the rest of our mineral program. So if we put in a mineral feeder, we put one bag of mineral and we put one bag of salt, all we've really done is cut the levels of minerals such as copper and zinc and cobalt and manganese. All we've done at that point is then cut them in half. So to get the full value of the mineral, just use the mineral itself. It's been formulated and balanced so that you don't have to add things like extra salt. If you have consumption issues, pretty much any mineral company you're going to work with, but especially Cargill, is going to have a different regional variation that will probably be a better fit for you. So this is the only time I'm going to get on my soapbox, is that producers don't need to be adding extra salt to their mineral. If they have to add extra salt to cut back consumption, maybe we should be looking at a different formulation to get that proper consumption without watering down the mineral levels.
Russell, is there any final thought or statement that you want to share with the listeners before we wrap up today?
I just want to thank you for the opportunity to be here today, and thank you for the listeners, and encourage everyone to keep working and to reach out to someone if you have questions. Reach out to a Cargill rep. We have them across the country. And again, we're looking to help serve our customers, and we're looking to help serve their businesses and bring value to them. And I hope that I can continue to do that throughout my career and help people answer questions and again, solve problems.
All right. Well, thank you for joining me today for this conversation. Like I said, it's always an important topic and a topic that goes over well. Listeners, if you want to connect with Cargill or Russell, check out the show notes, or you can message me as well, and I can get you some contact information if you prefer to do that directly. But with that, remember to subscribe, rate and review the show, share it with a friend who might enjoy this episode, and happy ranching, folks.